I strike 2 on my way down. Donatello takes out a 3rd with his staff. Already the pudgy ones are starting to panic. Raph loves this stuff. He's not alone.
Why is he narrating? Is he crazy?
Hardcore crazy.
I love these guys!
Hello, we're Bloobcast. I'm Ewan.
I'm Rob.
And I'm James. But the question is, why are we called the Bloobcast?
Yes!
Yeah!
Awesome! Yes, dudes and dudettes, Major League Butt Kicking is back in town! Oh, yeah!
Okay, so before we get started, just something I want to get out of the way. We have been doing this podcast for about a year now. At least at the time we're recording this. So I want to say to everyone who has taken the time to listen to any of our episodes, thank you very much, and we hope you stick with us for future episodes.
Yeah.
We were born in the hells of 2020 and came out strong and powerful in a year. We are the rising phoenix.
We literally did, because we recorded our first episode during a heat wave.
Oh yeah, I remember I was literally passing out throughout all of it. It was brilliant.
I remember it well. We were in a sewer, and then a glass canister fell on our heads, and it was horrific. And then within several days, we had grown to incredible sizes, and then we became turtles.
We were trained by a rat master.
And that ties into what we're discussing today. We're discussing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, specifically the original comic book series that started it all, because while the Turtles exploded in popularity in the late 80s with the goofier, kid-friendly cartoon, the series actually began with a darker, grittier comic book series, which was intended to be a one-off homage/parody of some of the most popular comics at the time, namely Frank Miller's Daredevil, The New Mutants, and Frank Miller's Ronin. The series follows 4 turtles mutated by a canister containing a radioactive compound who are trained in the art of ninjutsu by their sensei, a mutated rat named Splinter. Splinter's motivation for training them is so that the turtles can avenge the death of Splinter's former owner, Hamato Yoshi, by killing his killer, the Shredder, the leader of the evil Foot Clan.
Yeah. Oh,
Cowabunga,
wow.
dude!
Damn.
Yeah, well, as you said, Rob, they started out as basically a Daredevil parody. I mentioned earlier about the canisters falling on our heads. So the original origin of Daredevil is that it's a little kid who gets hit by some toxic waste truck or something when he's trying to rescue an old guy, and then he gets blinded famously, and then develops supersonic hearing powers that make him the blind superhero Daredevil. So in reference to that, with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a little boy pushes an old man out of the way of the truck, but instead of blinding him, the canister bounces off his head and knocks into a little boy's hands, and he's carrying these 4 little pet turtles that he'd bought, and it shatters, and they all fall into the sewers together.
Yeah.
And it's an alternate history to Daredevil.
A day that started like any other, but ended changing the course of many lives. I witnessed an accident. A young boy carried a glass jar with 4 pet infant turtles. An old blind man was crossing the street when he was almost run down by a large truck.
Hey! Look out!
As the truck swerved, a metal canister bounced out of the back. It smashed open, releasing a glowing ooze which covered their bodies.
Also, what's funny is that there's certain other references to Daredevil, like Splinter, who's their mentor, is the pet rat. He's named after Daredevil's mentor, who's called Stick. And the Turtles' arch enemies are the evil Foot Clan, which is a parody of Daredevil's enemy, the Hand.
Yeah.
Now, that explains so much, because I was wondering for the longest time why the hell is a ninja group called the Foot. It just sounded like they got the wrong end of the stick. Like everyone else like pulls the cool straws out, and they get the short straw that just says, "Yeah, you're the Foot now." Have fun with that.
But it's a good parody of like superhero tropes in a way. This idea of a mutagen just turning turtles into superheroes.
I think that's why it works so well, because like the story, at least the first issue, because it's intended to be a one-off issue, like one-off comic.
Yeah.
It works so well because it takes itself super seriously, but the humour comes from the fact that the turtles are trained by a talking rat, and it's these turtles doing ninja. And the figure of that is it's drawn in the style of Ronin.
Also, Jack Kirby style sort of artwork with like heavy sort of detail and shades and stuff like that.
And the big splash pages, which, as comic terminology, is when you've got the whole page filled with like one bit of artwork that kind of like accentuates like a bit of action.
There's also like, you know, the big speech bubbles and sound effects like, you know, bang, wow, you know, that sort of thing that Jack Kirby did in the original sort of Silver Surfer comics.
Yeah.
The whole narrative style of the first volume, where it's like so super serious and so like, you know, involved in that kind of that story that Rob was explaining at the start. It's so clearly aping off of like Frank Miller's like self-seriousness. If anyone's read like Batman, is it Batman Year One?
I've got that myself, yeah.
And Dark Knight, The Dark Knight Returns, where Batman he was basically taken from the campy holy smokes, Batman, it kind of taken from that and put into the kind of more Christopher Nolan-y Batman that we know today, where he's like grizzled and angry and miserable. That was Frank Miller, who basically got that ball rolling. And so it's really hilarious just seeing that style of narrative, but it's with Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, but what's funny is that the TMNT actually start, as you say, like really serious and quite gritty, to the point where it's just almost a parody, but then it becomes a bit more silly as it goes along, and it does...
Right off, I don't know, I think right off the bat, after even the second story with the mouses is inherently silly.
I'll just say, it just gets a bit more slapstick as it goes along, though. There's a bit more of a sort of cartoonish element. It realizes what it is a little bit more. Yeah.
Well, it realized that it had the potential to be very kid friendly. All of us grew up with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in some part of our lives.
Absolutely.
They were there as a kid's property. They're very kid friendly. We'll get onto that because I know for a fact that the UK was not a fan.
No, Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles.
Yeah.
Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. Heroes in a half shell. Turtle Pop.
That's a good kind of train into how I discovered this, basically, because my first encounter was with the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles on VHS. I remember watching this cartoon as a kid and just kind of being a bit confused by it, because it was very silly. The characters looked like little inflatable balloons and stuff like that. But it was a bit of fun, I kind of watched it and that was okay. But then a few years passed and I discovered this thing called the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on Jetix, I think it was at the time, which is the cartoon show that had animes and stuff and a bit more edgy cartoons on it. And that was the 2003 series, and suddenly it was all dark and all that.
Turtles count it off. Live by the code of the martial arts. True. Never fight unless someone else starts. Always stick together no matter what. If all else fails, then it's time to kick butt.
I really got into this. I was really obsessed with Michelangelo the Turtle and stuff like that. And then I discovered that there was this whole web of things related to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, movies and comics and stuff like that. But, I've only recently kind of discovered the comics recently through Rob. Rob kind of introduced me into the comic series, and it's fantastic. And I really want to talk about how much I love it a bit later on. But that's kind of my origin story, my superhero origin story, my super turtle origin story, if you will.
Yeah, so I had some kind of vague awareness of Ninja Turtles growing when I was really, really small. Because I was born in October 1993, so I missed the initial Turtles boom of the late 80s, early 90s by a few years. But I do have flashes of seeing the original cartoon on TV. But I think my first time I kind of like remember having real exposure to it was CBBC. I think around 1998 started showing Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation, or Hero Turtles, as really titled over here. And this was a live-action show made by Saban, who created Power Rangers, which was infamous for including a fifth female turtle called Venus de Milo.
Green Turtles heard the news, changed to mutants by an ooze. Found on the floor, raised by a rat. Now they're ninjas, how about that? Check it out, another one found. Made a way to Chinatown. With the rest, yeah, that makes 5 Ninja Turtles. Now they're live.
Oh, yeah,
I remember watching it at the time, and that was about it, because I think after that series, Ninja Turtles was dormant for a couple of years. But around 2003, I came across a VHS tape at my house that my mum owned of the second live-action movie, The Secret of the Ooze, which is the one with the Vanilla Ice song Ninja Rat.
It's the Green Machine, gonna rock the town without being seen. Have you ever seen a turtle get down? Slamming and jamming to the groove sound. One, two, three, four. Into the new jack on the rock and roll the place with the power of the Ninja Turtle face. Iceman, you know I'm not playing. Devastating show what the turtles are saying. Ninja, ninja, rock, ninja, ninja.
And I watched that. I think it was about 9 years old, and I fell in love with it. And around that time, I went to my primary school fete, and at the toy stand there, I found a micro playset which opened up into, it was, I think, in the shape of Leonardo, and it opened up into the sewer lane as a little figure of Michelangelo, a little figure of Bebop, who's one of the bad guys from the cartoon. And the perfect timing behind this is a month or so later, the 2003 Ninja Turtles cartoon started airing over here, so I got into it just at the right time for this new cartoon to come out. I watched some bits and pieces of the 2003 cartoon over the years and enjoyed what I saw, and I also saw the CGI film that came out in 2007 at the cinema when I was 13. I think it was around the time because I remember reading a review of it in Empire magazine that mentioned that the Turtles side as a comic book which was like a bit darker, a bit grittier. And it's something I remember really wanting to check out, but it was one of those things that was not easy to track down at the time. And then I think when I was around 19, so first year of uni, the 2012 cartoon started. I remember I started watching that and getting into it. And also around that time, I started to check out the recent IDW comics. I was really into that series to the extent that I used to wait impatiently for every new trade paperback volume to be released. I'd like pre-order everyone, like ask for them for like birthdays and Christmas. But how I discovered the Mirage Turtles, which is the Ninja Turtles that I'm most attached to, is around May 2013. I went to the London MCM Comic Con, and there was a stand selling comic books there. And because I had an interest in the Ninja Turtles, I asked the man who was selling the comics at the stand as if he had any Ninja Turtles comics. And he dug out all the Ninja Turtles comics he had. He had 4 of them, but I bought all of them. One of those was a recent IDW issue. 2 of these were tie-ins to the 2003 cartoon, which are published by a company called Dreamwave. The 4th one was one that caught my eye particularly because the cover was a redone version of the very first issue of the original Ninja Turtles comics. And I was like, wonder what this is. And I took it home not knowing what it was. And then I started reading it. And I remembered the dialogue at the start was exactly the same as the first episode of the 2003 cartoon.
My name is Leonardo, and right now my brothers and I are in a mess of trouble. Our backs are up against the wall in some trash-strewn alley, cornered by the toughest street gang on the east side.
Look at the freaks! What's with the dweeby costume? This ain't Halloween.
You're going down, freaks!
Yeah!
Nobody messes with the purple dragons, especially wearing stupid turtle costumes. He's wrong. We're not wearing costumes.
And I kind of started looking through it, and I realised it was a colour reprint of the very first issue. And I was amazed because I never thought I'd ever get a chance to read that very first issue. And that was what hooked me in as a fan. And I ended up getting some of the hardback Ultimate Collection books that collected all the Eastman and Laird issues. And I think only last year I managed to get the whole set. So I've got all 5 Ultimate Editions, which collects that whole first volume. So at least the issues done by Eastman and Laird.
Wow, that's good.
You know that bit where, like, in the cartoon, in the intro, and Splinter, like, goes from being a human and he turns into a rat guy?
Splinter taught them to be ninja teens.
He's a rat
tentacle rat.
That's my entire memory of anything Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle related.
Or is in that pink bathrobe?
Yeah, that's it. That's my whole story.
Wow. That was like, literally the first thing you ever saw TMNT related. That just one scene.
It's that one awesome scene of a guy turning into a rat thing, and I think I like vaguely remember the intro of the show, but like I don't even really remember the turtles in it. And then I was aware of the Megan Fox film.
Oh
God.
no!
Also, I remember when that was announced.
No, whoa, chill. It's just a mask. See? Don't freak out. Right?
Yeah, so I saw that, or I didn't see it, but I heard about it. The only thing I heard about, aside from that, was that there was like a rhino and a pig guy, and they're called Bebop and Rocksteady. And aside from like, okay, no, to be fair, I was aware of like the names of the turtles. I knew that it was Michelangelo, Raphael, Donatello, and the other one, Leonardo. And I knew that their rat master was called Splinter. And I think I vaguely knew that the lady who hangs out was called April O'Neil.
Yeah.
But yeah, very vague. Like, you know, a friend of mine was annoyed at me yesterday because I didn't know which weapons the turtles used. You know, some people know exactly which character carries which weapon. So I've actually got it written down here to remember.
Oh, I don't know. I don't. That's out nerding me there. Even I don't know which weapons they carry really.
I've got Donatello stick, Raphael knife things, Leonardo katanas, and Michelangelo nunchucks.
She has my back.
This is Katana. She's got my back. She can cut all you in half with one sword stroke, just like mowing the lawn.
Fair enough.
It means Japanese sword.
What does katana mean?
It means Japanese sword.
But yeah, no. So, do we want to sort of talk about the comics a bit more and stuff, like the original kind of source material that's kind of booted up the whole shebang, as it were?
Yeah, of course. One thing I want to say is how they came up with the idea for the turtles, because it's quite a funny story. It's basically Eastman and Laird, who are the creators, they were illustrating one night, and Eastman drew a picture of a Ninja Turtle, and the pair of them found the idea of a slow turtle being like a swift ninja hilarious. So then Laird drew one to try and make a better Ninja Turtle, and eventually it escalated to the point they'd drawn like 4 turtles with distinct weapons, and one of them had written, they called them Ninja Turtles, and then the other one had added the Teenage Mutant part, and they were just pissing themselves laughing, saying this is like the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah.
And then they were like, yeah, they should make a comic about them.
It's funny. But like, just the whole idea. Do you know what it is? It's like 2 guys having fun with this unique idea, really. That's what I really love about these comics. You can tell, also just from the notes they've written, that they are having a whale of a time writing this story and writing these characters and drawing them, having these crazy adventures. You know, like, everything that you want from a series, like you know, from a comic book series is there. Aliens and dinosaurs and all sorts, really.
Dinosaur aliens,
in fact, and time travel, and like it's kind of crazy how one thing does happen to another. Like the turtles' lives are extremely interesting in the point that like one minute being attacked by ninjas, next minute they're getting attacked by aliens, next minute they're going through time. It's like literally one thing after another. It's just like wow.
They are unlimited in what they get to do, I think, which is really fun. Like the concept does allow for like just kind of any idea that they want. There's an entire comic where it turns out that it's all set in feudal Japan, and it turns out it's just Michelangelo just doodling some ideas.
I love that.
That's one of my favourite issues, actually. I like that one because it's kind of like shows that Michelangelo's got like a creative trick. He likes making stories. I think that's a really cool character trait.
Yeah.
Michelangelo's the fun one. Like, he likes to just goof about and have a good old time.
Yeah, he's the chilled out one. I liked the Donatello issue with Jack Kirby where Jack Kirby shows up. I thought that was incredible.
I love that issue. That's one of my favourite ones as well. It's when basically Donatello, he goes down to April's basement where there's this guy who's renting it, who's called Kirby, and he's found this magic crystal that allows him to draw anything. Well, he can draw anyway, but the crystal makes his drawings come to life, basically. And the idea is that all of Jack Kirby's creatures are alive in his head, and he's got a portal to this world that he drew, where all his everything he's ever drawn is alive. And Donatello has an adventure there. It's a lot of fun.
That must be April's new tenant. What's he doing? Whoa! How'd he do that?
What? A green monster? I don't remember drawing you. You must be here for your crystal. Look, pal, I was only borrowing it for a while. Just put the stick down.
Slow down, friend. I know I must look weird to you, but I'm not here to hurt you. My name is Donatello, and I don't know anything about any crystal. But what I really want to know is how you just did what you did.
It wasn't really me. I mean, I can draw, sure. Been doing it for years, but it's this crystal. It supplies the magic.
What I also love is the way that issue came about. At the time, Jack Kirby was having like legal trouble because there's a lot of kind of issues with comic book artists not really owning their artwork because it goes to like Marvel or someone. So he was in a lawsuit trying to get all his artwork back. So what's I think it was Peter Laird's idea actually. He wanted to do an issue where they used Jack Kirby as a character and donated all the profits to his legal fees. And they actually got in touch with Jack Kirby's estate to see if they're allowed to. Then they declined the offer of donating legal fees, but they said, yeah, you can use Jack's likeness as a character.
I did see that in one of the notes that you know they would always write little notes and comics and comments throughout the comics. And I did notice that one of the things they said was that they were supporting Kirby during, like, you know, there was like the whole big controversy about various artists not having the rights to their own work. So it was very cool to see Laird and Eastman basically saying we're on their side. But of course they were, you know, they're creators themselves. Yeah. And you know, I think it was really cool that they were able to exercise the creative freedom that they did, because, you know, as you said, like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is so anarchic. Like it was literally just whatever idea that they had that they just kind of threw in there.
It was very sweet.
Yeah, because that's the thing. It was a self-published comic. They published it all themselves, so they didn't have like to deal with anything like any kind of like bigger higher ups. So it kind of gives the artwork kind of this really unique look and vibe, because it's obviously not as flashy and like slick looking as like a typical Marvel DC book, but it's got this really charming rustic nature, and it's what's really unique about it is Eastman and Laird's collaborated on it together, so the visual style is a melding of both their own art styles, and which gives it that all the more distinctive look, I feel.
Yeah. One thing I thought was really interesting, because there's a lot of self-contained stories, there's like little sort of mini adventures, one-shots and stuff like that, but there is a strong sense of continuity between the stories. Like, the location of the Turtles is always kind of remembered between the comics. Like, that Jack Kirby sort of one-shot comic I mentioned, that has kind of nothing to do with the rest of the story. But, you know, the fact that the Turtles are staying with April O'Neil at this point is kind of still noted. And that's still part of the premise of that story as well. But obviously that location changes as stories go along. Do you know what I mean? They change from location to location. Yeah. Certain things are happening to certain characters, and that carries on. Like, eventually they get a cat. You know, it's just I like that there's a lot of development throughout.
Yeah.
It's not just like you know, a self-contained sort of like thing like a SpongeBob episode. You know what I mean? It is an actual continuous story that you can follow as you read the comics, which is really lovely.
Speaking of SpongeBob, with the Kirby episode being able to draw like people into real life, it just reminded me of that horrifying SpongeBob clone that SpongeBob drew with a magic pencil that started like drawing various dangerous things and dropping a penciled-in spanner on Patrick's head.
Or the little character that goes, la, 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 la.
Yeah. Where's the leak, ma'am?
I love that episode.
He's going to the door.
He's knocking on the door. Squidward's answering the door, and...
He's beating up Squidward.
Doodle boy, stop!
One great example of what you're just saying about continuity is the Raphael one shot is where we first meet the character Casey Jones, who is basically this whack job vigilante who decides to be a vigilante because he watched loads of cop shows on TV and decides, okay, I'm going to get a hockey stick and I'm going to beat the shit out of people.
That's a brilliant.
And it's a great issue. Yeah. It's a really fun comic, and you expect Casey to be just one-off character who never shows up again. And then, like, a couple of years or so later, because the comics they've been coming out every month, they just came out, like, when Eastman and Laird were able to get them out. Like, Casey Jones just shows up in the main Ninja Turtles series when the Foot Clan invaded the Turtles' home. So it's just that nice little bit of continuity there.
Yeah, of course. With Casey Jones, it's like... I like his origin story because, like, literally... I think they actually say it in the notes. We're just fed up of, like, superheroes having to have, like, their parents die or their planet blow up or whatever. Whereas with Casey Jones, he just watched some like shows about cops or whatever, and he's like, you know what, this town needs a real hero like me, and he just gets a hockey thing and just goes and fights crime. I think that's fantastic and also kind of believable. I think if anyone's going to go around with a hockey, like become a master vigilante, that's probably how it's going to happen.
the series is both a loving homage and a riff off of like various superhero tropes. Like it's always making fun of like some of the dumber ideas in various superhero canon. Like the fact that like the very first thing that happens like basically in the story is that they all go to space. Just right off the bat.
It's like it starts with this dark kind of like gritty urban ninja story, and then by issue 3 you find out that there's these weird aliens who are like pig brain things who live inside in the chests of robots. And then the turtles find them and end up going into space and fighting dinosaur aliens. It's
Triceratons.
Triceratons, yes.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That.
What? Like, just right off the bat, it just goes completely nuts when you think like, okay, concept is Mutant Ninja Turtles. So okay, you think sewers, you think ninjas, I don't know, maybe feudal Japan. Nope, we're going to space, baby.
But I just love that it all happens in one story arc, because like they go from literally fighting robots and losing Martha Splinter to suddenly encountering aliens, to discovering dinosaur aliens, fighting in a space like gladiatorial arena, and then just like being sent across the stars to meet what I want to say resembles the Krang. I think they're like these sort of like Krang aliens.
Yeah, I think that's where they got the idea for the Krang for. But these are Utroms. And interesting, even though they start off kind of more adversarial to the Turtles, they actually aren't malicious.
No.
They're actually friends, they're actually allies of the Turtles after everything that happens.
Which is strange, because in the cartoon, they're like the evil alien from like Dimension X going... But yeah.
Yes. Speaking of which, the Shredder, he's in every other version of the Ninja Turtles. He is like the big bad who the Ninja Turtles have to defeat.
Watch out for Shredder!
In this comic, he's only shows up like 3 times, and heck, in the first issue, he gets killed.
Yeah.
Then he comes back.
Then he comes back, but the thing is, the artists actually note like, oh, we really didn't want to bring him back, and then I think they keep bringing it up like after every issue, like, oh, I don't know, like we don't like the idea of villains always coming back. But then one issue like, well, we kind of needed the Turtles to do this, so we decided to bring him back for that. And it's just like, okay.
It was more of an excuse to get the Turtles out of New York for a bit.
Yeah, I like what they did
Yeah.
with it, though.
That arc is one of my favourite arcs. It starts with the Leonardo one-shot issue. You get two stories going on. So you get this completely the story of Leonardo just running around the street, single-handedly fighting like Foot Ninja, which is very kind of Samurai Jack in some respect.
Yeah.
And then at the bottom of every page, you've got this other story going on, which is the other turtles, Splinter and April, getting ready for Christmas. And then we end the issue with both stories kind of coming together as Leonardo crashes through the roof of April's house, and then he's like, "Oh, the Shredder's back."
Leo, what happened? Who did this to you? I'm gonna find out who did this.
No, Raph. Wait. He's back. The Shredder.
And then the next issue, we've got the Foot Clan like invading their home and like forcing them to retreat. And like because Leonardo, not only is Leonardo injured, but they've got to help April out. So that's another element that they've got to deal with. They end up in such a bad state they had to flee the city and go to Northampton, which is actually where Eastman and Laird are based. The reason they moved in there is because they wanted to try and write stories based in their hometown, see if the fans would be receptive to that. I really like the way the arc ends, because as this third issue, it's not a really big like action-packed issue. It's this more kind of slower paced, more kind of somber story where April's kind of just like reflecting on how this event has affected the other characters. Like talks about and explores the mental state of everyone, how everyone's taking what's happened.
Yeah, it's a very emotional sort of thing. It's no dialogue there's like no speech bubbles or anything like that. It's all kind of April's diaries and just kind of going into detail about how each turtle's been affected by this. And it's, you know, some of the turtles are all kind of becoming reclusive. They're all divided. It's very somber. It's a very somber sort of tone to it. It does obviously end with a high note, but it's just like, it's kind of weird because every other comic before that had either the turtles kind of triumphing in the end or being kind of more upbeat. It was the most sort of bleak of the comics, I thought. But I really enjoyed it for that. I love that they could tell quite a serious story, make you really care for the characters that were obviously meant to be a satire of characters that other people took seriously. They had kind of come into their own a little bit. They actually sort of evolved into these sort of characters that we can respect, almost like superheroes in a way, and you kind of root for.
Well, yeah, the original like characters, like as first envisioned in the first comic, like they are fairly interchangeable. It's only with the various comics that we start to see the different personalities develop. Like, I like the little details of Donatello like fixing everything because he's like the techie repair guy. Little details like that, and Raphael is, you know, the hothead. There's just slowly they build on these kind of characters.
Yeah, like Michelangelo. Later adaptations, he's kind of more portrayed as like the practical Joker, whereas he kind of has that in the comics, but he's more kind of just like the kind-hearted one who likes comic books and action figures and likes making stories. I love the relationship that Michelangelo and Raphael have, because Raphael's like really protective of Michelangelo, which you see in some of the early fight scenes where whenever someone goes after Michelangelo, Raphael's like, "Oh, stay away from my best friend," and just wails on them.
Yeah, no.
Well, Mikey's the youngest, isn't he? So and Raphael's, he's not the oldest. He's like the second oldest, but he's quite protective. And Leonardo's the leader, and that gets him into trouble with Raphael later on when Raphael, being the hot-headed that he is frustrated by their inaction when the Foot return and Shredder comes back and he demands that they go back and fight, you know.
And he's the kind of more like individualistic sort of turtle, whereas like, you know, Leonardo's like, we gotta work as a team, man. You know, we can't win unless we're together. Whereas Raphael's kind of like more like, no, I'm gonna take them on. I'm headstrong. I can do it alone. If you're not with me, then I'll do it. Do you know what I mean? In some ways, both characters do learn from each other because, yes, there is a lot of inaction, and towards the end of the comics we read, Raphael does go out and becomes brash and like headstrong and actually tries to take on the Shredder as well, and that inspires the other Turtles to come with him. But also, as he fights along, he realizes he can't take him alone either. So they both like kind of build each other up in that respect, I think.
Yeah, that's in the Return to New York, which is, I think that's a good natural endpoint to the Turtle story, but it ends in a way that leaves things open to more stories. And I think it's a big one because we've had like 9 or so issues. We're hanging around Northampton. We've had these really fun kind of like one-shot issues that don't have any like real major continuity to them, but they can just be enjoyed in their own rights.
Yeah.
And them to have got this big story where they're going back to finally defeat the Shredder after he forced them into hiding. And what I really like about that is it's Leonardo who has the final confrontation with the Shredder, because he's got a score to settle with Shredder up, because at their last encounter, Shredder absolutely kind of battered him and like knocked him out essentially. So Leonardo's kind of got more of a personal stake in that than the other 3, I think.
Yeah, he's got to prove himself to Raphael as well, because Raphael calls him a coward at one point, so there is that feeling of pride and kind of defending his honor, which is big part of this is of course the ninjutsu stuff. He's got to defend his honor. He's got to and end what Shredder began. It's great.
It is, It's amazing how they combine so many different things. I mean, we've obviously mentioned the more comic booky stuff of the aliens and stuff like that, but there's also that sort of sense of ninja honor and stuff like that. There's a good, I want to say that there's probably like a Kurosawa influence going on here. Like you can tell that the creators love like ninja like stories and stuff like that. And it does show, especially in that Michelangelo one shot we mentioned earlier, where it's just like a bit of fiction that Michelangelo's written. Unlike a lot of like superhero comics and stuff like that, they embed a lot of like mythology and stuff like that. I think they try to add a sort of like, I'm trying to think of the right way to describe it, but it reminds me of Samurai Jack a little bit, how they kind of try to create that oriental mythological element to the storytelling. There's a lot of that going on, especially when Master Splinter is telling his origin story. It feels like, we're learning an old tale from a ninja, do you know what I mean? If that makes sense? I don't know if I'm making much sense.
Yeah, kind of.
It feels very feudal
kind of
Japan.
sense of world building,
there you go.
as it were.
Sorry.
You're right. The story of Hamato Yoshi, Splinter's master / owner, because at the time Splinter's a little pet rat. That whole story is very Kurosawa. Like it's like, this is a story from long ago. There was a man, he was in love with a woman, and then but then there was an evil figure called was it Roku or
Oroku Nagi, who's Shredder's brother.
Oroku Nagi, yeah. So he had this rival in the clan, and so they battled, and Yoshi and his wife escaped to America, but then of course his brother found him and defeated him, it's all very that's like something that a samurai would shout about in a Kurosawa film. I can totally imagine it.
As you already know, my master was a ninja of great power. One of the greatest practitioners of ninjutsu in many centuries. I was his pet rat, and I learned ninjutsu by mimicking his moves. For many years, I was happy. We were a family. But that life ended when the Shredder sent his foot ninja to attack my master. My master battled honorably. But through their dishonorable ways, the foot ninja overpowered him.
I know one character was called Toshiro when they met like a Japanese American character, or and I was thinking Toshiro Mifune from Seven Samurai. Yeah, that's definitely a reference.
Yeah.
So yeah, little things like that are cool.
I think that kind of carries over to the fight scene, because I think I remember reading in the notes in the Ultimate Editions where they talked about kind of they used to watch like martial arts scenes and use those for inspiration for the fight scenes, and that gives them a real energy. Even though they're just static comic book panels, you get a feel for how energetic they are.
Oh,
yeah, definitely.
No, definitely. There's definitely I think they study choreography or something like that. Like they study they must study martial arts to a degree, because the way they draw the characters like fighting and stuff like that, it does seem incredibly detailed. Especially every movement and stuff. Oh yeah, sorry.
The thing is, they didn't actually. I think I remember reading in the books, they didn't actually study martial arts. They just watched martial arts movies and copied the moves from that.
Yeah, but
there's definitely a Bruce Lee vibe to a lot of it. And I know that they referenced Bruce Lee as well, because there's a character called Chang Li, and he just looks exactly like Bruce Lee. So.
One thing that I also want to bring up as well is that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as a concept has actually inspired a lot of different artists that work in animation and stuff like that now today. Are you guys familiar with Jonan? I don't know if I say his name right, but Jonan Vasquez. He's the guy that made Invader Zim.
Name sounds familiar. I know Invader Zim, obviously.
Yeah, he made Invader Zim. Before he did Invader Zim, he made this really wacky graphic novel called Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. But basically, it has the same kind of gritty style that you see in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But his influence is he's basically sung praises about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles continuously. It got him into writing and drawing comics, and he's actually made some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics himself, cartoons himself, which Nickelodeon has since gone on to air as well. And there's a lot of Nickelodeon's actually put on their YouTube channel all these kind of short animated things from other artists of the Turtles, and you can see all these shorts with this the different art styles and everything, just depicting the Turtles having all these crazy adventures. So again, it goes back to what I was saying. They are highly adaptable, creation that can be shown in different medias, and I think that's really cool.
One thing I really enjoyed reading the original comics, which, by the way, audience, you can find all of them online for free. They have all just been scanned online. They're very old comics. No one cares.
Yeah.
But one thing I really enjoyed about reading these old comics, literally from the 80s, is that they're little time capsules of 80s comics, of the 80s comic industry. And you get all these brilliant adverts for all of these weird comics that were being released in adjacent to the Turtles. And you get some really weird ones. I think there was one called was it Pterosaurs or something? And it's all of these dinosaurs with big weapons. It looks great.
And there's another one called Flaming Carrot, who's literally just a guy with a big carrot for a head, and he actually crossed over with the Turtles.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of crossovers. There's a lot of fun little, interesting stories that they kind of mess around with. I actually really liked the Carabus episode. I know Carabus, the creator, is evil, but the actual comic itself was a lot of fun.
Oh, I thought it was Cerebus.
Cerebus, I don't know. Cerebus, Carabus, whatever. It's written. Cerebus was cut out of the cartoon.
There's one issue I want to talk about, which is one of my favourites. It's called The Survivalists, which is about the Turtles. It starts with them having a picnic, and then they end up trying to stop a group of crazy right-wingers from setting off a nuclear bomb. And their plan is basically they want to ignite the nuclear war with Russia, and they want to prove how good they are at surviving. Why I like that issue is because we get to see the Turtles using stealth to take out their foes, which is something we don't get to see all too often. And we get to see them use their unique kind of abilities they have due to being amphibious. Yeah. One particularly cool moment that sticks out to me is where some of the Turtles are hiding underwater, disguise themselves as large stepping stones, because they're able to breathe underwater. They can stay on there for ages. And then when these crazy right-wing thugs come along with their guns, the Turtles just burst out of the water and just attack them.
Yeah, it's definitely the most 80s story.
This is the thing, like, with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, that comic in particular you mentioned, they're literally just having a picnic, aren't they? And then just all of a sudden, they're just roped into this massive adventure that could start World War III. And it's like, okay. Like, literally, I don't know, there'd be I think there's a, like, you know, the first comment I said, they just bump into aliens, do you know what I mean? I get the fact that they're mutant turtles, but the way crazy stuff happens around them is just peculiar. Like,
they live in a world where Jack Kirby is apparently just writing up various magical characters from his pencil.
And he happens to be staying in the same the same building as him. So you know.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there you go. That's just the beauty of the Turtles universe.
Yeah. After they finished the Return to New York story, they finished off the first volume of the Turtles with this big, long story called City at War, which is basically about the fallout of Shredder's death, where the Foot Clan are kind of like in a war with each other over New York, and the Shredder's daughter comes in, she assists the Turtles, and she basically gives them a kind of like a deal. So basically, you need to help us have a kind of like a peaceful kind of transition, and then we'll kind of leave you alone. We won't attack you anymore, basically. And then after that, they did a second volume, which was written by a guy called Jim Lawson. And that only lasted like 13 issues, because this is when the Turtles was in decline, and also Mirage Studios had a flood at their offices. But then Image Comics, who are the company made Spawn, they did a third volume, which was done by a guy called Gary Carlson and drawn by Frank Fosco. And this was designed to bring the Turtles back to their kind of more gritty roots, and had like a lot more kind of 90s violence and gore. And it was noticeable because it disfigured 3 of the 4 Turtles in some way. So Raphael got his face scarred, Leonardo lost a hand, and then Donatello became a cyborg. This run ended after 23 issues in 1999, but there are 3 more issues planned. But I think what's cool is in 2018, IDW, the current rights holders for comics, re-released them in colour, and then they got the original writer and artist to come back and do the last 3 issues.
I need to read this run because it does sound really cool. To be fair, like it sounds like it's a different take on the Turtles. It's a bit more darker, so I have to check it out.
After that, I think there was a 4th volume which ignores the events of Volume 3, which is done by Peter Laird by himself.
Yeah.
And this one is, I've not actually read any of this one because it's I've not really sorted it out because it's not really been printed anywhere else. But basically, skits forward in time, and it features the Turtles in their 30s, and aliens have come to Earth, so the Turtles are able to walk around freely. And this run was it ran from 2001 until 2009, when Peter Laird just sold all the rights to the Ninja Turtles to Nickelodeon.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about the movie?
Can I talk about one thing? Because this will sink into the movie, because it relates to it. Let's first talk about Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles.
Yes. Oh god.
So, in the UK, during the Thatcher years, everyone was going insane because it was the Thatcher years. But also, there was a bit of a moral hysteria, mainly led by Mary Whitehouse, who was a conservative crank who threw a hissy fit about any kind of sex or violence on TV. She threw
Especially
a hissy fit
Doctor
about
Who.
what... Yeah, 1 second of Tom Baker drowning was enough for her to be like freaking out. It's literally 1 second of footage, and he's fine. It just looks like he's drowning for a second. Anyway, so she was a weird crank who like spent the better part of like several decades complaining about the BBC. But one of the things that the British media had a really big freak out about was anything related to ninjas. I don't know why. They just decided one day that children were going to try and make themselves their very own nunchucks. This is true. I'm not even joking. This is real. They actually just decided, children are going to figure out how to make nunchucks and hit each other with them. And so any reference to nunchucks, any reference to ninjas was just completely scrubbed from not just Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but like a lot of adult films as well. It was a really bizarre time. Like we had the censorship board then called the BBFC, and they would do like all the ratings of films, and they used to cut and edit like films in really quite savage ways. A good example of this being TMNT, where they cut 1 minute and 51 seconds from the film. So a substantial amount of time. So anyway, that's a good way to sink into the movie, I guess. Which they actually there's a song in that called "Turtle Power." They removed any reference to ninjas in that as well. It's nuts.
It's just no, I don't get that. I mean, there was always a bit of a weird. I personally didn't think the film was that violent, in my opinion. I didn't think. I mean, I thought, okay, there's a little bit of action, but it wasn't violent. I don't know, like.
It's not.
It's not.
It's very kid friendly. It's very kid friendly.
I think the reason is because at the time the Big Turtles thing was, rather than the comics, was the cartoon, which is much more kid friendly. Basically, it was to Ninja Turtles what the 1960s Batman was to Batman comics, basically.
Yeah.
And this movie is. Yeah, in comparison, it's not as dark as the comics, but it is still a pretty faithful adaptation of the comics, but it does kind of soften it a bit. So, yeah, it's a PG movie, so it's not, like, super unsuitable for kids. But, yeah, it is compared to it makes the cartoon look like Teletubbies, basically.
It kind of just made me think, like, what if Barney the dinosaur got given a pair of weapons one day and started to live in a sewer? Because they do look like little Barney the dinosaur characters in this movie.
Rob, you say that the UK was fine with the cartoon. They weren't. Like we said, they were called the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles.
This is true.
And they removed any nunchucks in that as well.
Yeah.
So they
I
just
don't
freaked
mean
out
the
over
UK,
the
I
whole
mean,
thing.
I mean the US.
Oh, yeah, the US loved ninjas. The Americans went crazy for anything samurai or ninja related throughout the 70s and 80s. And 90s.
But they did try to they got a bit funny about this movie, though. That's why there's less violence in the later movies as well. They actually...
Yeah, because they showed it to Playmates who made the toys, and they were...
I can imagine them being impressed.
They didn't want anything to do with the movie. They didn't even make any toys for the movie. They were convinced the movie was going to bomb. And then at the time, it became the most successful independent film of all time. So then when the second movie came out, they made new figures that were based on the movie versions of the Turtle.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like the fact that April looks very much like how she looks in the original comics, as opposed to like the yellow jumpsuit that she wears in the cartoon. And the other thing was Splinter's origin story, which I mentioned, with the cartoon. It's a guy, it's Yoshi, but he turns into a rat man. Whereas in the original comics, he's just the pet of Yoshi, who is he's practicing martial arts, and then little rat Splinter is teaching himself martial arts in the most adorable way. And then of course he witnesses the murder.
As my master returned home to find his beloved Shin lying on the floor. And then he saw her killer. Saki wasted no words, and during the struggle, my cage was broken. I leapt to Saki's face, biting and clawing, but he threw me to the floor and took one swipe with his katana, slicing my ear. Then he was gone.
So I suppose, I guess that's quite a dark story, but they did it in the film. So fair play to the movie for, I guess respecting children's intelligence and realizing that, kids know what violence and death is. Yeah. I always find that weird when they censor that in, children's media. Kids know that people die.
Yeah.
That was a thing in, 90s cartoons, the 90s, Marvel cartoons, X-Men and Spider-Man. They'd always say destroy rather than kill or die. So destroy Spider-Man rather than kill I'm going to kill Spider-Man. And even stupider was the Sinister Six weren't allowed to be called the Sinister Six. I think they were called the Insidious Six.
Yeah.
But back to Ninja Turtles. I think while the movie's not a straight up retelling of the comic, it takes certain story beats from issues of the comics and uses them to tell a unique story. The whole story where the Turtles get forced out of their home by the Foot Clan and having to move to Massachusetts. That's adapted pretty much beat for beat in the movie. I think the only real big change is that they switch out the Turtles. So Raphael gets beaten up rather than Leonardo. And then they end the movie with kind of a redone version. It's kind of got parallels to the fight at the end of the first issue.
Yeah.
have any idea about who or what this is?
I don't know, but I'll bet I never asked to look for a can opener.
You fight well, in the old style. But you've caused me enough trouble. Now you face the Shredder.
The Shredder? Maybe all that hardware's for making coleslaw.
One thing I want to kind of bring up as well with, because you mentioned that, like, you know, the movie itself is not like a fully... It does get some things right about the comics, but it's not a full retelling, if you know what I mean. It's not completely up to, you know, it's not 100% accurate. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is probably one of the most reworked and adapted sort of thing I've probably ever encountered. Like, you know, the original comics has inspired so many cartoon shows and movies, and they're all different from each other in some shape or form, like cartoon shows and movies. And they're all different from each other in some shape or form. Like April O'Neil has been like depicted as being like a reporter, a lab assistant, a high school student. Like, she's literally been everything across the board. The Turtles themselves are always different across media as well. The Krang, as I mentioned, you know, as we discussed, like their original counterpart in the comics, the name's something completely different, and they're the good guys. So I just find it very interesting. In fact, Shredder also doesn't, you know, he doesn't appear too much in the comics, but across other things, he's everywhere. He's like the Joker to the Batman to these guys.
And in 2003, in the 2003 cartoon, Shredder was a neutron.
Yeah, no, exactly. But this is what I mean. Like, it's the most kind of reworked thing. Like, that they can reinvent the Turtles and always have a new, unique spin for them. And like, literally, there's so many different things. And Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles is a more upbeat sort of thing in comparison to the more serious shows. I just like how it's been this continuous retold and reimagined sort of piece of media. I really love that. There's different... Everyone's...
That's what I like.
Yeah.
I like that there's so many different versions of the Turtles that even if there's a version you don't like, it doesn't matter, because there's going to be like so many different versions you might like. Although there is some stuff I do laugh about, because there's a point in the 90s where I think they'll just sign off on anything Ninja Turtles. So we got some right stinkers. Like, we got, don't know if you guys know about this, but the Coming Out of Their Shells tour, which was this stage musical where the Turtles were in a band and they'd like play these really, really awful songs.
Pizza power, applying sauce of food delight. Pizza power, oh, that's what makes us feel alright.
And
I have heard of this.
And I think the low point is this point where some guy in the dressed as Splinter comes out and sings a song about skipping stones.
Set it free, I'm standing. Keep on, skipping stones. On a smooth blue pane of glass, I'm skipping stones.
But it does have a story. The story is the Shredder. He wants to get rid of music, and he hates music so much, he performs a rap about how much he hates music.
The gift of song is the gift I curse. I hate music. I shall think it's the worst.
But the best bit, I think, is this bit where this guy in the Shredder costume, he's just roasting kids in the audience.
That's amazing.
Haven't you seen enough of those turtles? Enough! What's your name? Huh? Peter. Peter? Is that your sister? Friend? Huh? Cousin? What's the matter? Couldn't get a date?
Although the lowest of the lows for the Turtles is they did these straight to VHS. Oh god, we're old. Straight to VHS specials with these really, really dodgy turtle costumes. The first one was called We Wish You a Turtle Christmas, which is the plot was the Turtles trying to find a Christmas present for Splinter, and it ends with an awful Turtles rendition of the 12 Days of Christmas.
On the 5th day of Christmas, the Turtles gave to me 5 video games, 4 mango covers, 3 skateboards, 2 comic books, and a pizza with pepperoni.
But the worst was this one called Turtle Tunes, which was Turtles making music videos of their own versions of public library songs. So stuff like Yankee Doodle Dandy or whatever the song was, is now Leonardo Had a Rowboat.
Leonardo had a rowboat. This is making me sick. Let's just hope he stays afloat and that he won't get seasick. Leonardo, row, row, row. You've got to row much faster.
Action, action, go, go, go!
This is a disaster.
And there's stuff like Michelangelo, I love to skate around the fountain or on top of a pizza all covered in cheese.
Oh god, I'm googling this right now. This looks the most. It looks like Five Nights at Freddy's or something. This is horrifying.
Yeah, it's the worst turtle suits imaginable. Like in Ninja Turtles 3, they stopped using the Jim Henson suits, and those suits look horrendous. But compared to the suits they used for Turtle Christmas and Turtle Tunes, they look like the most state-of-the-art Stan Winston animatronics.
It looks so scary. Sorry, I'm just looking at a picture. Like it looks like it's staring into my soul. Ah.
Michelangelo, we gotta go and make a show. Oh, oh.
Well, one criticism of the movie is Leonardo gets established as the Carmelo Doubt leader, and Raphael is established as the impulsive, angry one. But then Michelangelo and Donatello are kind of in the background, and they seem kind of more interchangeable.
Yeah.
I guess the issue is that you've got to focus on like a specific kind of protagonist, like, you know, character arc. You've got to give the audience something beyond just like them kind of goofing about or like fighting people. So, you know, you've got like Michelangelo and Donatello kind of make sense as like the comic relief characters.
How you doing?
Hi.
Nice night.
Mm-hmm. Pizza dude's got 30 seconds.
You know, as opposed to like Raphael, who's kind of the focus of the film, really.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do like.
And I also think Casey Jones was adapted and portrayed perfectly in the film.
Yeah.
He's the perfect mixture of badass and dumbass, like he is in the comics. And also, I want to highlight my favourite line of the movie, which is in the bit where Raphael and Casey first meet. Casey originally has like using his hockey sticks, and then he decides to bring out a cricket bat, and Raphael's just like, cricket? No one understands cricket. You gotta know what a crumpet is to understand cricket.
It is very funny.
Well, no game around here. Cricket.
Cricket? Nobody understands cricket. You gotta know what a crumpet is to understand cricket.
Yeah, I think Casey Jones is one of the things I did actually really like about the movie. It's weird how I could just sort of recognise chunks of the comic seeping into the movie. One minute I'll be like, oh, this is a bit goofy, and then all of a sudden, like, it literally looks like page from the comic in the movie. It was just like, ah.
That's what the director did. The director was a guy called Steve Barron. One of the things he also directed was the music video for Aha's Take On Me.
Yeah.
He basically, I think he got, was it a colour paperback which contained issues of the comics? What he did was he flipped through and put like post-it notes on certain issues and were like, yep, that's the movie, and then kind of used that as his basis.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, yeah, what's like a good entry point for people coming into this? Like, I enjoyed the 2012 cartoon. I thought that was quite a cool, like, you know, like a modern rejigging of it.
I actually think the 2012 cartoon, to be fair, is really, really good. Like, in fact, it's...
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some bits that are really disturbing as well. Like, the mutant...
Yeah.
I mean, have you seen the way they, like, when the mutagen gets spilt on the human, it looks like something out of John Carpenter's The Thing. Like, just literally tentacles spewing out of a human going, ah!
Leonardo's a leader in blue, does anything it takes to get his stitches through. Donatello is a fellow, has a way with machines. Raphael's got the most attitude on the team. Michelangelo, he's one of a kind, and he knows where to find it when it's party time. That's a split out of every single skill they need to be one lean, mean, greedy, critical team.
Got a really cool voice cast because he's got Mae Whitman, who was Katara in Avatar, and she was Roxy in the Scott Pilgrim movie. She voices April O'Neil, who's a 16-year-old April O'Neil. We've got Josh Peck, who plays Casey Jones, and we've got Sean Astin, aka Samwise Gamgee, as Raphael.
Oh, that's brilliant.
These are all good points. I liked that it had that kind of more appropriate for kind of teenagers vibe to it. You know, it was definitely made more for like 12 to 14-year-olds, I guess. Like, whereas the original cartoon from the 80s and 90s was very much like clearly for younger kids. It just seemed to get the tone of the comics better, like where it's still kid-friendly and fun, but it's got a bit more, like, as you said, James, it is quite scary at some points, but it's cool. Like, it's
Yeah.
And at one point they referenced the skeleton fight scene in Jason and the Argonauts, like they actually, which I thought was really cute. There's little details like that I noticed, and I was going, oh, the animators have had fun with this one, so I enjoyed that.
Yeah. I also really liked the 2003 cartoon because that one actually adapted issues from the comics. I did them quite differently because, of course, it's more kid-friendly, but it is one of the more accurate adaptations of those comics, which I think was helped because Peter Laird kind of oversaw it on the first couple seasons.
Yeah. But also, because Peter Laird was actually deeply involved in the creative process. He said he was talking about the original TV show from the 80s, 90s, and he just said that it was charming, but it wasn't the Turtles that he made, you know what I mean? Whereas the 2003 one is a bit more of a loyal adaptation to the original comics. And it does it quite nicely. It still has that sort of like, detailed, shadowy element to the series. And it also feels a bit more like Daredevil. I think there's a very real Daredevil vibe to that show in particular that stands out from the rest. I mean,
and also it takes the Donatello Jack Kirby story and makes an episode about it.
Yeah.
So it gets points for that as well.
I don't think there's ever been a single animated adaptation of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that I've disliked, though. I think I've liked, to some degree, to varying degrees, I have liked every single Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle animated adaptation. Even the 80s and 90s show is kind of charming in its weird, cheesy...
It's really cute.
It is cute, it's silly, and also, again, I love the 2003 show, the 2012 show. Even a new show that came out not too long ago, I think it was...
Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah, I've not seen that, but I've heard good things, and from what I've seen, the animation looks amazing.
That's what I was about to say. It looks like the best animated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles thing I've ever seen. Like, the opening introduction is just just unbelievable. Like, if you watch that, it looks like every frame is just fluid, and it's all done in one shot. It's just like, oh my god. And it's very Gorillaz inspired as well. It looks kind of like, they took like a bit of inspiration from that in particular, which is why they look a bit zangy and sort of punky.
Oh yeah!
These'll do.
Hey, yo, guys! How about we take the glowy ones?
Do we want to talk about our favourite turtles at all? Or...
Yeah, of course. That would be a good question to end on, actually.
Yeah.
So, so who wants to go first? Favourite turtle?
I'll go first.
Yeah, okay, go for it.
Cool. So Donatello is my favourite. Simply because he's just like, I feel like he's the most underappreciated turtle. Not a lot of people like Donatello, but he's definitely the smartest. I like how he's portrayed in each adaptation, particularly in the 2012 show. I like how he's treated in that show in particular. I just like the idea that he's kind of like this sort of uptight, sort of nerdy, like, oh, I'm the smart one, but also sometimes he's a bit of an idiot himself. And, he's still a turtle himself. He's still a bit of a laid-back guy who loves pizza and everything, just like the other three. He is the brains, but he's also kind of a bit socially awkward as well. He's got his little stick and everything. So I think Donatello.
I think that might be why he's not as appreciated. I think that might be because of his weapon choice being a stick.
Really? I thought that stick was cool, like the way, like.
Yeah. I mean, but when you've got people like swords and nunchucks, it does kind of, think some people will gravitate towards those more than the stick.
I suppose so, but you can get by with a stick. Anyway,
I just knew that James's favourite one would be Donatello. I knew it.
Okay, so
I just
why?
Oh, because he's a nerd and you're a nerd.
Yeah, that's about right. Right, well.
So mine is Michelangelo. It did used to be Raphael because he was the edgy, angry one.
Yeah.
But over the past few years, I started to warm more towards Michelangelo because I kind of went into this a bit earlier, but later iterations portray Mikey as basically the practical Joker, which is kind of in the comics, but here he's shown to be kind of just the kind-hearted one, which is something I relate to because I feel that's Michelangelo is probably the turtle that embodies me the most. I do kind of sometimes gravitate towards characters I relate to, and also like that he likes to write stories in his spare time, which is a cool character. And I think that's something that got kind of carried over into the comics as they went on into like volumes 3 and 4.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I agree with that.
Raphael, he's mean, but he's cool. Or something like that. That's the song, right?
Raphael,
I know, he's cool, but he's rude.
Cool but crude.
Yeah.
Right. I like Raphael. He's angry. He's got the most to prove, I feel like. He's always, I think, because he's got like his wise master Splinter, who's like, you know, all about, you know, finding inner peace or whatever.
Yeah.
And Raphael's the hothead, so he's the one who struggles the most with, like, you know, the more passive parts of ninjutsu and martial arts, and I quite like that conflict. Yeah, no, it's good to have a character like that in the dynamic, the one who's like the wild card and kind of, you know, where everyone else is coming out with like plans. He's just the one who Leroy Jenkins it, you know.
Yeah, no, I agree.
just jumps into the action, doesn't think, just like, you know, don't think, just do. Which is always a cool character to have. So I quite liked Raphael. Like, he came across the strongest to me, like reading the comics.
Yeah.
Poor Leonardo. Sorry. Anyway.
So
right,
yeah.
I think we're good. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find all of our previous episodes on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. We've done episodes on stuff like Scott Pilgrim, we've also done episodes on Samurai Jack, and done some video game episodes like we've done Spyro Dragon, and our last episode was on Tomb Raider. We also have a website, which is bloobcast.com, which is another place you can find all of our episodes. And on social media, we're at bloobcastpod on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. So be sure to follow us on there and keep updated with what we're doing and when we're getting new episodes out. And if you want to get a shout out in the future episodes, we have an email address, which is bloobcast@outlook.com. So you can send us any feedback or suggestions for future episodes. And also, please check us out on Apple Podcasts and give us a rating and a review. And please share it around to friends and family who you think might be interested.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, and before we go, Ewan, can you tell our audience what we are discussing in the next episode?
We're on the edge of greatness, turning darkness to light. We're right beside you, ready to fight. Oh, wait, hang on, I can do this. We're gonna win in the end. Anyway, we're doing She-Ra.
Yeah, the old Netflix show. Yeah.
I'm excited. As you may have gathered, I like this one. I may have watched the intro every time. Anyway, yeah, we're doing She-Ra, Princesses of Power.
Yeah, I've started watching it recently, and I've been getting into it, so I'm excited to get through more of it and discuss it next month.
I've watched the first episode and I was impressed. I shall watch the rest of it at some point. Yes.
I'm very glad, because I was the one who recommended this one, so I was terrified that like Rob and James are going to be like, what? So I'm glad.
Nah, it's alright. I enjoyed it. It's good.
Until next time, the Bloobcast bids you farewell.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm gonna miss those wannabes.
Yeah, I kinda dug the initials on the belt buckles.
Huh, you would. I could go for a slice, though. There's that place on Bleecker. We are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We strike hard and fade away.